Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for joining us today. It's a Q&A session with Kojo Samuel. I'm Chris Proctor. I'm the head of programme at the music charity responsible for Town Hall and Symphony Hall. Before we kind of kick off formally, I'd like to thank both BIM Birmingham and Cube for their support in kind of sharing this opportunity with everybody. And I'd like to say a huge thank you to Kojo as well for taking the time out to join us.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
We'll probably have a bit of a chat between myself and Kojo for the first part of this session, and then we'll open it up to the Q&A. For the Q&A bit, for any participants that would like to ask a question, if you could use the kind of waving hand or raise hand kind of symbol, I'll look out for you, like we can see demonstrated in the corner here. I'll look out for you and I'll mention your name, and then you can liaise directly with Kojo. So first of all, Kojo, where in the world are you?
I am in a very sunny Southeast London today, which is where I live, Forest Hill. Yeah, that's where I am.
Cool. And, you know, we've picked the warmest day of the year to do something that's based inside. So, you know, excellent work.
That's the story of my life. It doesn't bother me one bit. I've spent so many like hot summers indoors. It's like, what? Like, it doesn't bother me at all. Yeah.
Okay, so a few little teasers just to get us going. So what was the first album that you bought yourself? That you remember?
Yeah, that's right. You know, you prepped me with this question. You think I would have thought of something, right? You know what? It was so long ago that I can't actually remember the exact first album I bought, but I'll tell you what I can tell you. I can remember some of the first things I remember really, really like loving, and a couple of the first albums I bought. So I remember a track, it might have been the late 70s or the early 80s that it was from, but a song called Betty Davis Eyes by Gene Carr. And I just remember, I'm pretty sure that's what it was by. If I've messed that up, but it's definitely called Betty Davis Eyes anyway. And that's the first time I remember having a record and just listening to it over and over and over and over again, which is basically like a habit of mine that I have now, which is when I really like something, I'll just rinse it. And this could go on for days, by the way, until I feel like I completely know it. And then in terms of albums, it would have very likely been some type of early Prince, you know what I mean? Maybe Purple Rain or 1999 or something like that. And then just to give you one more, I remember a group called Scritti Politti. There was another group in the 80s that I used to love, and they had an album called Cupid and Psyche. And I remember that was one of the first albums I remember where I really kind of zoned into what production was about and technology. It was a very kind of technical and kind of, it was a really good album. Do you know what I mean? Very kind of techno pop, electronic, but funky and groovy. Yeah, and I remember really liking that. So somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's a lot of listening to get on. That's great. Later. And was there I mean, I know given the nature of the job that you do, but is there a specific track that you last chose to put on and just listen to yourself? You know, that you kind of go, I just really want to listen to so-and-so and put them on.
Oh, do you know what? I can't remember. There was a Victoria Monet song that came out recently that I really liked. I don't know if, can we curse on this? It was definitely called Ass Like That, but I mean, but it was about going to the gym, which is cool. But I really like the bass line and the groove on that. What else have I got recently? I like the new James Blake. I really like that a lot, you know. I really like him a lot. And you know what? That new Rosalia, TKN, I like that. So yeah, those are some of the things I like to do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess the summer period is, you know, no longer really happening for quite a lot of us, whether it's us in the venues or you guys out on tours and in festivals and so on. But would you mind talking us through what kind of projects you were working on prior to lockdown, so just before it all kicked in?
Well, yeah, actually, so just before it kicked in, I was prepping a tour for Pussycat Dolls. So they had a reunion tour that was going to be, I think it was early April, it was due to start. And there was no band, which really means for me, it's almost like producing a show as opposed to MD in a band. So it's a lot of the same kind of ideas and concepts, but it's just putting it together. And I've been kind of doing that for about a couple of weeks pre the lockdown. And we were all really excited. And I think literally I remember I just finished like the intro to the show and some of the interludes, and we are going to go into dance rehearsals like in a couple of days, and we got the word that it was canceled. So yeah, that was the last thing I was doing before.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And how early in that process, particularly for the Pussycat Dolls tour, were you kind of contacted or employed? You know, because from a venue point of view, we get avails for a couple of years' time, and we're mapping out tours with promoters and agents and artists. How does that timeline fit with yourself in terms of where the MD aspect kicks in?
Terribly, because they always leave it to the last minute. we're always the last people to know. It's like literally half the time I find out about a tour, I'll just be on Instagram and I'm like, oh, okay, so it's a tour, okay. No, in all fairness, I think with that particular project, because they'd had an X Factor reunion performance, which I put together and I did, and that was in November. I think maybe a month and a half after that, there was like, hey, there's probably going to be a tour, you know, whatever. And, you know, I would say maybe 6 weeks ahead, 8 weeks ahead, you start getting confirmation. But to be honest, it really depends upon the organization. It varies. Sometimes you'll have lots of warning. Sometimes it'll be like, hey, we've got this. We'd love to get you involved. You know, I'll be like, when does it start? And they'll be like, well, if you could start next week, it would be great. And I'm like, so it really does depend on the level of organization with that particular camp, you know.
And is it and again, forgive my slight naivety here, but is there a difference between something where it's produced for television versus something, whether it's a tour or then whether it's something like a Glastonbury or a Brits performance? Is there?
Well, because okay, so let's say if you're doing something for a particular TV show, it's probably going to be a one-off. You know what I mean? So for example, let's say that an artist is doing Sunday brunch in 3 weeks time, and, you know, I might get it. You know, they might only book that like within a month or 6 weeks anyway, depending upon the label. And, you know, all the artists are pitching for these shows anyway. And it might be a case of like, okay, this is how we need to do it. This is the lineup. Kojo, do you have any ideas about lineup or arrangement or how you think it should be and whatnot? So those things will be quite a bit closer to the events, and they'll usually be in a one-off sense. Again, with touring, longer scale touring, it depends. So like if it's an artist that you work with a lot, like, so for example, like say someone like Jess Glynn, I've worked with her, well, God, it's over 5-6 years now, something like that. But like, you know, we've done a few different campaigns and a few different things. So you'll kind of, I'll always be in dialogue with the management about what's happening and when and this and that, whatever. But if it's something that's a bit more of a one-off thing, like say the Brits or Glastonbury or something like that. Say, okay, Stormzy, that's a good example because that was a one-off show originally. But to be honest with you, I think Glastonbury is in June. Yes, in June. So I can't remember. Was it in June last year? I can't remember.
Yeah, it was a year ago tomorrow that the Stormzy gig was. So
wow.
You know, happy memories, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew about that a long way in advance because, to give you an example, so the year before that, Stormzy was doing Wireless Festival. He was headlining Wireless. And that's the first time they contacted me. They'd actually contacted me we've bumped into each other and spoken about doing things a few times over the years, but hadn't been able to organize anything. And they called me in to do Wireless. And long story short, just cross wires, dates not lining up and things not being right. I wasn't really able to contribute fully to that show. I just helped out with a few technical things. So because of that, when Glastonbury came around, they were really keen to make sure that they kind of confirmed me early and things got kind of booked and kind of, you know, we knew it was a big show and it was an important show and everybody wanted to be ahead of the game, so to speak.
And how much of an impact kind of an input did you have, you know, from a point of concept? So taking, you know, if Stormzy says, right, I'm headlining Glastonbury, Kojo, carte blanche, what we're doing, where we're going, you know, do you get yourself involved earlier on, or is it?
It's a bit later, you know, because if I'm honest with you, like the way, I think that the thing to understand is like when you're doing like anything beyond like if you're doing a small show, a theater show or whatever, it's very much, for the most part, it's more about the music. Do you know what I mean? When you start getting into arenas and bigger than that, it becomes very much about the production. Do you know what I mean? It becomes very much about the whole show, the extravaganza. Now it depends on the act. You know what I mean? So acts usually have a choice. They're either going to have a big show or you're going to have a big band. Do you know what I mean? So what that means is that if you have a big show, you're going to be spending a lot of money on lights, visuals, creative, props, fucking flying cars, whatever, you know what I mean? Whatever people do. Whereas, or the other option might be, well, look, I'm just gonna have this very simple background, very simple staging, and we're just gonna have a shit hot band. We're gonna rehearse forever, and we're gonna have 12 people on stage, and it just varies. But with Stormzy in particular, he's very much a visionary, and he has a creative team that he's worked with for a couple of years. So they would have already been working on the concept for that show and any particular show for ages. Do you know what I mean? Like long before I would have kind of gotten involved. And I think that's the same with any large scale type of performance, like what I call like an arena level performance. It will start conceptually, but then there's a point at which they will come to you and say, okay, right, there's the theme is culture, and how are we going to show that, and how are we going to do? And then I'll be like, okay, I'll start thinking musically what that concept might mean to me, and then how that relates to the songs that we have available in the set. Do you know what I mean? Then I might listen through to his whole catalog and be like, you know what, that song might not have been on that album, but it says something particular about what fits into that theme. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, it's about shaping it. Like, so as I said, there would have already been an overview of the whole performance, the whole concept, but then it's like, that has to work with the music. And that has to work with the lyrics of what's being, it has to work with, so my job is then to kind of like, it's like, there are all these pieces to this puzzle, and then my job is to make the musical side of that work. And that will often be sort of like a lot of sort of back and forth as well. Like the creative director might be, well, look, I really don't think that song goes there because I see it as a different color, and that song doesn't sound like that color to me. And I might be like, well, the thing is, if you look at what's going on lyrically, it actually makes sense. Those songs are essentially about the same thing, even, you know what I mean? So it's like, there might be some, or I might just like the fact that, two songs fit together. They might be in the same key. Do you know what I mean? They might be in the same tempo. So I might be thinking, oh, do you know what? We could do a great transition from that song to that song. And I'm thinking about that because I know that if I can connect the show in a really exciting way, it's going to move better and it's going to feel better. So it's like, sometimes they might not think about the musical aspects of, so they might choose a song because of, I don't know, like they might like the title, they might like the vibe of it, the feel of it. But I tend to think of things in sections. So I might think about, well, how do those 4 or 5 songs go together? Not just that one, that one, that one, that one. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like just piecing it together. And it's back and forth. But again, any big sort of like big scale performance is like, it really is a team effort. Do you know what I mean? There's so many people involved, and everybody's important in it. Really, they really are. But it's his vision. Do you know what I mean? It's the artist's vision. Your job is just to help them realize their vision at all times.
And with that, do you then, I mean, I know, that there's a common way of taking something from kind of what is a very fixed, regimented, recorded 3.5 minute track into what could be a 7 or 8 minute festival or live arena thing. How do you approach that? Do you kind of say, look, I really like this track, but could we do this? Do they give you the creative freedom to be able to make that arrangement, and then do you kind of bat it to and fro between them?
Again, it really depends on who it is. Some people are like, this is my song, this is how it goes, don't do nothing to it. Do you know what I mean? But other people are like, you know what, I've been listening to this song, I've been performing this for the past year, give me something. Do you know what I mean? So then you have a bit more freedom and openness to kind of like experiment with it. For me, that's when it becomes interesting, because not just because you want to mess around with people's music, but just literally because that's, for me, like, that's beyond what I consider MDM 101. It's kind of like, what can you bring to the table? Because at some point, somebody's got to have an idea. Do you know what I mean? At some point, somebody has to bring something of interest to this performance, even be this song. Do you know what I mean? It's like, again, if you've been playing the same song, it might be an artist's biggest hit. Do you know what I mean? It might be Hold My Hand, and it might have been something that the artist has been singing for 2 years solid, TVs, radios, acoustic, full band, electronic, everything. And it's like, it might get to a point where they're like, is there any other way to do this? Sometimes just for them. And then you might think, okay, well, you know what, maybe we start in the middle 8. Maybe we don't have, maybe we use the music from the middle section as an intro. Maybe we change it up. Maybe we add something else. Maybe we interpolate it with a different song. Maybe we do, but it's all about what you can do to give it more life and give it more longevity. Because I think it's the same thing for the crowd. I've observed over the years, it's like you might do a song in the beginning stage of an artist's career and everybody's excited to hear it because they never heard it before. But once you've done like, one festival run and a couple tours, they kind of like, oh, this again? Do you know what I mean? It's like but an artist has to sing those songs different ways. So it's like, take something like Prince Kiss, do you know what I mean? He would have done that song at different tempos, different grooves, different speeds, different whatever. You have to kind of keep it interesting for the listener as well and for the people that are going to the shows.
Yeah, I guess you kind of hear those fabled tales of being in James Brown's band, wasn't it? Always keeping you on your toes, kind of, making sure that it's constantly on, he's an absolute pro. You had to be on your A game every single time.
Well, absolutely, because sometimes, you have to bear in mind, it's not just, obviously, sometimes you're performing and you're putting something together for a crowd and for an audience, but also as well, like, you're working with an artist that has to perform this stuff and they have to feel vibed up about what they're doing also. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes it's like, you might change something just because it's like, they get a different feeling off of it and it makes them more excited about performing it. Do you know what I mean? I've never been in that position where I've had to sing the same song over and over and over again. But I can imagine that sometimes they just want like something different, and in my experience, when you're able to give that in a good way, that's where you get the most response. And that's what artists really, really like, when you can kind of, bring something to life without kind of damaging it. That's the other thing as well, because sometimes people think like, oh yeah, okay, well, I'm gonna do this to it, I'm gonna do that to it. And it's like, but then they fuck it up. It's like, you can't just do something, like everything is not gonna work. Do you know what I mean? So it's about doing something in the right way.
And then I guess kind of continuing on that theme, do you have a kind of go-to, there's some kind of get out of jail cards that you use that you can kind of go, right, I've got this song, we know that, if we take the middle 8 and put it at the front and we vamp that to start with, or we move things around, are there any kind of tricks or tips that you'd be willing to share? Obviously, no.
I mean, I wish. I mean, if I did, it would make it really easy. No, for me, I really work off of emotion, man. It really depends on the song, the artist. Because as I said, you can do one thing for one artist and they love it, and you could try the exact same thing for another and they hate it. Do you know what I mean? There's no really one size fits all. But for me, I just always know how I want something to feel. I know the feeling I want to get from listening to something, and that's what I kind of work towards. But I can't really think that, like, I would say that there's always standard things which everybody does that I don't think are actually that exciting. If you say, like, oh, you're gonna have a breakdown, you're gonna have a crowd participation part, you're gonna have everybody clap now, you're gonna do a section where everybody goes to the left and goes to, yeah, anybody can do that. That's like, those are, if you watch enough shows, you can figure out, oh, do you know what? Okay, shows have to have that. Okay, show has to have that kind of bit. Oh, show has to have that kind of bit.
Okay, well, whilst I've got you then, at that point, what are those things? Let's run through a few of your...
Okay, well, crowd participation. Do you know what I mean? It's like, people love it when crowds participate. Crowds love it when they participate, when they can kind of be a part of the song. So you might you might extend the chorus and have a part where you put the mic and they sing that part back or whatever, or, things like that. A breakdown, which kind of accentuates the backing vocals, things of that nature. Or, for me, what I think about music directing, it's like, sometimes you're directing the band and you're directing the artist, so to speak, in terms of putting the show together. But sometimes I feel like I'm directing, like you're directing the crowd, because it might be like, you know what, there's something in this track which you don't really hear because it's buried, but I want you to hear that. Do you know what I mean? So it might be like a little guitar line that's kind of really subtle, is in the mix, but it's like, okay, that we might go to a section, we might break everything down, and it just might be the drums and that guitar riff that I haven't actually, that's not even anything new. Do you know what I mean? It's actually in the song, but I'm just trying to present it in a way and direct you to something else that's good about that song that you maybe hadn't thought about. And sometimes the artist will be like, oh, where'd you get that from? I'm like, it's in the song. It's like, it's in that part. So sometimes it's just about teasing out parts of the music that are actually interesting and maybe deserve maybe a bit of a bigger spotlight than they're able to get in 3 minutes, 30 seconds, you know?
And is that kind of, does that become that that mindset when you're in that bunker, kind of in that 2-week lockdown of your own prior to that? Is that where you're absorbing everything, learning?
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, where you have that. Sometimes you don't have that. Sometimes you don't have the luxury of time before you start working on something, or basically prep time. I love having prep time. Do you know what I mean? I love, but then sometimes you can prep for something, and then you go into the room first day of the artist, and they're like, yeah, nah, don't like that. Yeah, nah. Now that's not what I was thinking. Actually, I was thinking more like this. So I really like to work off of a vibe. Like sometimes people will say to me, certain people have been like, oh, can you send us the arrangement? And I'll be like, I can send you the arrangement. I can send you an idea for an arrangement, but I don't know if that's what it's going to be, because it's, I like to feed off of the room, the energy of the people in the room. It's like, maybe the bass player does something and the artist is like, oh, what's that? And I might go, okay, yeah, do that. Okay, do that again. All right, hold on. Let's change that. Okay, guitar. Okay, can you double that? Do you know what I mean? And then you might look at keys. What are keys doing at that point? Okay, maybe you should all jump on that. It's like, and I really like to kind of work on the energy of the room, and I tend to get most inspired in the moment, if I'm honest with you. Do you know what I mean? But that's not to say that you can't plan for it. But I feel like in music, when you over plan, I just feel like you're missing a trick. Do you know what I mean? Like when people are like to me, okay, great, can we hear the arrangement before? And I'm like you can, but then you're missing the possibility of what can happen, in the room, in the moment when we're actually working, that spontaneity, that energy. You're kind of like cutting all that out. It's like saying, oh, I'm going to go watch a movie, but can I read the script before? It's like, well, what happens. It's like, you're not going to be surprised by anything you see. You've watched all the spoilers on the internet. You know what I mean? You've seen all the good scenes, and it's like you kind of. So yeah, I like to be open as much as possible.
And I suppose then when it gets to the tour time,
Yeah.
I guess the finessing and the trimming down and the polishing of sets, does it become a kind of a set delivered that then that like has a kind of rigidity to it? But I guess what I'm hearing from you is that there's always that element of riffing and mixing it up at the same time.
Again, it depends on the band and the artist, because so you'll have a time beforehand to whereby you might you're gonna have your ideas, you're gonna come up with your preparation, you're gonna have some thoughts, whatever. You're gonna get in with the band before anything, and you're gonna spend X amount of time working on the music and working on the show and how you feel it should be. Then the artist is gonna come in, and they might love what you've done, they might hate what you've done. So then you have a period of working with them to kind of give them what they want, what they need from that particular show, whatever it is. And you're just kind of inching towards pushing everything in place. When it's finally done and when it's like you have the show, it depends on what it is. If it's like, say, an arena tour or theater tour, for example, you might have a set list and a flow and everything might be great. But what tends to happen is maybe the first few nights things change. You know what I mean? So normally I'll be contracted to kind of get things started, get it going. I'll go on the first couple of nights of the tour, and then we might realize that, okay, something isn't working in the set, for whatever reason. So you're still kind of tweaking it. And then at some point, ideally, you have a set that everybody loves, and it just kind of, you might roll on with that until somebody decides, there might be a thing to whereby the artist says, actually, do you know what? I just want to change around the outro. I want to change that around. And yeah, it's really an ongoing thing. It's a stepping stone process, and it always changes. But again, that might be tour. Then you might finish tour in, let's say you do a regular October type of tour, that's a month-long tour, and then the artist, we might do a few Christmas shows. And then when it comes to festival season, you might then be using the basis of that set that you have for the tour, but then you might need to change that for festival season, because festival season is completely different in the sense that you're then preparing music for obviously the fans of the artist, but then there's going to be tons of people that aren't their fans. Do you know what I mean? So you're going to be looking for things. There's certain things that work in festivals, like, you know, interpolations of songs that people know. Do you know what I mean? Or like maybe doing a cover of something that everybody knows, and things of that nature are type of things you might do for a festival set. You might extend certain songs, you might do things, but by and large, I think that festival season is a really fun time for arrangements and whatnot, because it's a bit more freedom and it's a bit more kind of fun, and things might change. But in an ideal world, you want to get something that's 80 to 90% of the time going to be what it is. And there might be one place where it's like, oh, that song is not going to work here. And then the artist might pull it. And, you know, again, artists might make a decision on the day. Do you know what I mean? They might just not feel like doing a particular song for whatever reason. And it'll change slightly, but usually small changes.
It's really interesting because as a venue, we always see the end product.
Yeah.
You know, we see the last 2 hours of what could be 2 years worth of work from your perspective. You know, by the time it gets to us at our level.
Well, do you know what? You would hope that. What I mean by that is when you have a show that's been going for 2 years, you should have a great show. Do you know what I mean? And it should be really. Unfortunately, those shows they don't always get to develop. Do you know what I mean? That's what I think is an important. I love it when you are able to develop a show, develop a project with an artist, and develop something. I've been really fortunate. I've worked with a lot of artists over long periods of time. So, you know, again, it's a stepping stone process. Like year one, like year two should be better than year one. Do you know what I mean? Year one should be better than 6 months into the gig. The gig should progress. And if the gig's not getting better and better, then something's wrong, in my opinion. So a lot of the time, though, for whatever reason, gigs have a short rotation. So maybe they do one cycle and then they have to change band again. And you're kind of like, you go up a hill, then you're going down again. You go up again, you're going down again. You're up again. So it's like in an ideal world, you kind of you get some level of consistency with people, with personnel, and that's not just band. That's band, crew. Do you know what I mean? The text, everything. It gets better and better the more you do it. You know.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's that kind of familiarity, so that when you rock up to a gig, you go, "Oh, it's you," so you know, you kind of. There's that. It's almost a second nature by the time you're 6 months or a year into a tour.
Exactly, and then even like, and that extends to sort of like, again, like with creative directors and production designers and things of that nature. So when you're working with people that you've worked with a lot, like I work with a team called Tarbox a lot, and it's like, or we have done in the past few years, and it's like it comes every time you do a show, it gets easier and easier because they know how you work, you know how they work. It's like it just makes it easier to slot things into place. And yeah, that to me is like building a great team is the ideal thing. But that's like, you know, it's like with anything. That's like with a football team. That's like with it's like with anything. It's a stepping stone process you have to build.
Oh, great. Well, I think that feels like a nice point to open it out to anybody. So if for the Q&A section. So if anybody does want to ask a question, if you could use the wave or the thumbs up symbol, I'll look out for you, and then we can get the conversation.
Oh, that's Richard. Oh shit! Hey, man.
Hey, dude. How you doing?
Oh, good. Long time, man.
No, man. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. Becky Hill.
Yeah, man.
Rich used to do a gig with me when I did Becky Hill years ago. Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll let you into a secret too. I gig with Rich on a function band as well, so we've got that in common.
Nice.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of those kind of ethereal Watson-esque guitar lines. So
yeah, man, master the delay. Yeah.
Come on then, Rich. Seem as though you're on. Right. Have you got a question for Kojo?
Yeah, sure. So, Coach, how often do you find that you have to come back in and do kind of maintenance with bands? I mean, I think probably in some cases it evolves in a good way and the band just gets tighter and better. How often do you have to come back in and straighten things out? Maybe people have started overplaying or things have evolved in a way that's to the detriment of the song.
It happens. It does happen. It's a really interesting question because it depends. I hate to be one of these people that says it depends all the time, but it but it really does. You know, you have to check up periodically. Like again, let's say it's festival season, for example, and let's say that a band is gigging between May and August, September. Maybe you might go to a few shows along the way. It's not so much to, sometimes, if I'm honest with you, a lot of times it's more to check up on the dynamics of how everybody's feeling and how they're getting on, more so than the music. I can't really think of that many times that I've gone and been like, oh, what you doing and what you doing, you know, and to be fair, when I turn up, everybody probably does something slightly different anyway, but it's like, I think it's like, I think it's more about just making sure people are kind of maintaining okay, just emotionally on the gig, and things are getting on okay. And if people have made changes, seeing what's cool and what's not, and I might make a suggestion here and there and whatever. But like, I'm kind of like, unless it offends me, I'm kind of into freedom, man. I'm into people kind of expressing themselves. It's only if something's really bad, I might, or no, if it's something I don't think is working, I might say, yeah, I'm not really sure about that. I might, you know, so periodically, once every few months, you know. But again, it depends on the band, because if it's a band that's worked with you over a long time, let's say you've worked together 2 or 3 years over the course of a project, they've been with you in so many rehearsals and so many scenarios, they kind of have a feeling, they know what you'd kind of be cool with and what you wouldn't. And they tend to kind of self-regulate. Do you know what I mean? They'll kind of be like, look, you know, guys, I think that's a bit, da-da. And it's really like, I think what I try and do with the bands I work with, I try and get on the same page. I like us all to kind of agree. Do you know what I mean? Like, I like us all to kind of like have a general understanding of what we're trying to achieve. You know what I mean? And we're all a part of it. Do you know what I mean? I never like it to be like, this is my gig and you do it like this. And you know what I mean? It's like, it's our gig, it's our show, because everybody that's involved in it makes it unique and they bring something special to it. So I really try in the rehearsal period to kind of really kind of build that. And if the people are going to know there's certain things that I don't like and why, but it's more like I'll try and explain to it and get to really know where people are coming from musically, and then I try and let them know where I'm coming from musically, and then try and, you know, to just try and get like what I call a real good level of understanding. And when you don't have that, that's really when you kind of try and find other people to work with, if I'm honest with you, you know, because those people might not be working for you. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Yeah, that's great, man. I think you're absolutely right. I think if the kind of personality chemistry is right within the band, it will kind of self-regulate.
That's right. That's right. And to be honest, you should have teased that out in rehearsals. Like if there's, you know, I've personally never, I really like, character is really important to me too. Like in terms of like people that you get in the band. It's not just about, when you're putting a band together, it's not just about picking musicians, you're picking people. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know if I would have somebody whose attitude is like, yeah, wait till this motherfucker goes, I'm gonna do whatever I want. Do you know what I mean? It's like me and that type of personality probably wouldn't work out. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and I wouldn't have personalities like that in a band that allow that. Do you know what I mean? So yeah.
And do you find are there any kind of, do you go through a ritual? Is there a pre-show thing that you do with the band? Do you go out for a pint? Do you go out for a meal? Or, you know, for that aspect, and then getting closer to the performance time itself, are there any particular, I guess, to call your phrase, it probably depends on the artist and
yeah.
their approach.
No. But I mean, you know, to be honest with you, I would definitely say that I don't have any particular things of that nature. The kind of like, if anything, the time leading up to performances and gigs and this and that, whatever, is usually pretty intense, really. I like to work hard. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, we'll usually be doing a lot of work. There's no kind of set thing, but yeah, I think we like to have fun. I think if there's anything, I usually like in the mornings, you know, I tend to find that when we get into rehearsals, there might literally, the first hour and a half might just be like gassing about God knows what, or about, you know, what was just released on Spotify or this or that or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And then after that, you kind of settle down and get into the music. And yeah, you try and have fun with everybody too. I think it's important. But I'm the worst person. Like, people always say, like, I'm not even good at taking breaks. You know what I mean? So if I'd be lying if I said that, yeah, before the show, we all make sure we go out for a drink. But yeah, it's just more about building it along the way, I think.
Cool. Are there any more questions from anyone? No, that's fine. I mean, I guess, are there any other projects that you're currently working on that you're looking forward to? I mean, I know it's difficult because we're actually in lockdown at the moment, but kind of look into the future and what you might have also been working on during lockdown.
So I mean, yeah, it's a really strange. Well, it's just, yeah, it's an interesting time for the music industry because people are basically desperately trying to find different ways of working, different ways of doing things. I've been doing a few sort of like just small performances with like Anne-Marie, Ella Henderson. What else have I done? Yeah, in lockdown so far. Um, and they've just been like your kind of like people in their bedroom doing whatever, which is, I'm sure we've all seen a lot of. But people are now starting to talk about things happening from September, October onwards. But I think they're mainly going to be TV orientated. So in terms of particular plans, there's nothing as such that is like pressing at the moment. Everyone is sort of looking to move, everything is kind of moved towards next year. But there's one artist, a French artist called Luce in the Yakuza that I've been talking to about probably getting involved with early September. And she's kind of interesting. And as I said, I've been doing Anne-Marie, I've been doing Ella, and everybody else has kind of like moved to next year. So there's nothing pressing as such, but I mean, again, things are changing very quickly because we're at a stage where people are trying to figure out ways of doing things online. I think as it becomes more and more apparent that there might not be live shows for a while, there's been little requests here and there for different bits and pieces. So yeah, I think it's just going to be that type of year. You know, I was working on a podcast that I kind of started doing last year. If I'm honest with you, I started doing it, but the lockdown seemed like a good way or a good time to finish it. Just because they had a little bit more time than usual. And that's really just talking to musicians about their careers, about their works, about their journeys, this and that. But that's done now. So I've done that. That's going live in about a week's time.
What's the name of that podcast?
It's called About the Players.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. And it's literally just about that. It's about different musicians and different, you know, because I feel like, you know, again, like I was saying, we all sit around and talk about things before the gigs and after the gigs. And, you know, between sound check and shows, there's all these long ass conversations that kind of sway about the industry and whatnot. And I thought it'd be really good to just kind of harness that. And then also for people to understand, you know, I know it's really difficult for people getting into the business. There's not a whole lot of resources that can really tell you A to Z how to go about having a career in music. So I thought it'd be something really interesting to kind of do. So yeah, but again, that's something that's done. I finished that, that'll be released, and the whole series is kind of done now. So we'll be releasing them bi-weekly and they'll be coming out. And then outside of that, I've actually been using the time to kind of just, just reset the clock on lots of things, really boring things like working with my computer, working with plugins and programming synths and working on musical ideas and things of that nature. So I'm quite cool trundling along like that for now. And then we'll see what kind of the end of the year brings up.
So it feels like, I mean, both from a venue perspective and from hearing yourself from a musician's point of view, it feels like 21 is going to be a pretty big year for music, assuming, you know, in the hope that everything goes the way that we want it to go.
Well, yeah, you know, I think that there's obviously, you've got everybody that's been away. Like, for example, that hasn't been doing anything. Those shows are obviously going to be rescheduled to 2021. Then you've got other people that sort of had plans to put out music maybe in 2020 that haven't been able to do that. So it's going to affect people's promo schedules and how things are moving. So I know quite a few people that I've speaking to are possibly moving things to 2022. So I think that for the bigger projects, it's going to be a little bit tricky. but I think I think music is really important, man. I think music is art, and I think, art is something really important to human beings, and all of us, we need it, So I think it's just, we're going to find different ways of consuming it and embracing it and kind of connecting with it. It's just a question of what those are going to be, and I think that it's just a matter of time before that, we get, I personally think there's going to be maybe, I can imagine some online events, one-off online events, maybe at big venues, maybe without crowds, maybe with, I don't know, but whatever it is, I think it'll be great. Whatever can kind of like, share things around.
Yeah, we've got, there's a question from Lewis to everyone. It says, hey Kojo, thank you so much for doing this. Like you said, the shift to online has been a bit strange. In terms of online performances, do you have any tips to keep an audience invested or interested?
I guess I can only speak on a personal level. I think that when people are doing things in an intimate setting, and it's clearly like in their bedroom or even it could be in a garden or whatever like that, I would say like less is more, really keeping it really nice and simple and focusing on the instrument, the vocal, I just think less is more in those scenarios, because I think that it's great to really be able to, hear somebody's voice or hear somebody play. And I think that's one of the beauties of live music anyway. And I actually like things being stripped down a bit and not being so kind of big and overblown. So that would be my kind of advice. That's what I enjoy seeing. I'm finding it when I'm seeing things that are too kind of technical, it's like, I feel like I might as well just watch a video. Do you know what I mean? I might as well watch a music video if I'm gonna just like, yeah. So that's what I would suggest.
Well, and we are heading into Glastonbury weekend. How many times have you been to Glastonbury, both as a performer and have you been as a fan? And the kind of, given the gravitas of Stormzy's set that was due to happen, was that expectation weighing on you as an MD or you as a musician and the rest of the band as well?
Okay, so how many times? I can't think. It must be around about half a dozen, maybe a little more. I think the first time I did it was with Plan B. I think I remember doing that. And he was main stage, his pyramid stage, and he was maybe third headline, it was the evening. It was an evening. I remember that. I've done it with Jess Glynn. I can't remember if I did it with Jessie J or not. I can't remember, but I've a few times. Yeah, and I always enjoy it. It's a great festival. I've never really been as a punter because I've always been working, which is a drag. But I've had a couple of times when I've really enjoyed it and had fun with it. And yeah, Glastonbury with Stormzy was I think it was it was just massive, man. I mean, I think there's no way to kind of like, not just for me, for everybody. You have to bear in mind, it was a cast of like 100 people. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's like not a normal show. And then even aside from that, it's like, that was the only time we did it. That's just the one show. So it's like, obviously you had production rehearsals and things of that nature, but in terms of at that stage or on a big stage with an audience, and there was only one time, and what you saw on that night, that's the only time we ever saw everything together also, because if I recall, like, some of the people couldn't make some of the rehearsals. We just never had everybody all together at once. We had different sections. So I think that it was just nervy for everybody, because it's like, is this gonna work? Like, is this all gonna kind of connect? Are they gonna be here? Is that person gonna be there? Who's popping up on that side? I think for everybody, it was but it wasn't just on me. I would say literally everybody involved, from the choir to the musicians to the lighting people, the lighting designer, and to the creative directors. And it's like, is the pyro gonna go off? There's all these type of things. I mean, but for me, fortunately, so as I said, I don't play in the bands anymore. I haven't played in a band for years. So for me, I was in the sound gallery, sort of helping with the broadcast mix. So I was able to watch it as everybody else would have been watching it at TV. So there, I'm literally mixing the show as it's going out or playing a part in doing that. So I kind of was able to have a good read on how I felt it was going. And like I said, I always go off of emotion, and I felt really, really good. Like I felt it was something special. I remember the energy in the truck was electric. It really, really was. And I remember coming back afterwards and nobody was sure. Like everybody, nobody was sure if it actually worked. And like even Stormzy himself, it was like, oh, I don't know, you know, because he had a lot of technical problems on that day. So that was actually a really difficult show for him. It's not a show that he enjoyed performing. So it was really difficult, but it's only like maybe a couple of hours afterwards when people started seeing the feedback and started seeing Twitter and then started seeing clips, and everyone's like, oh shit. Now it's like, for me, I was like, yeah, that's what I saw. That's what I remember seeing, but it took a while for it to kind of sink in. So yeah.
That's really interesting. And I did check before we got on this call, and that Stormzy's set is on iPlayer for this weekend as part of the Glastonbury experience.
Oh, great. Do you know when? I haven't even seen yet.
Well, I think it's just on demand, so I managed to stream it anyway. But I think the BBC are putting it out on Sunday afternoon at some point, I believe, as well. Okay. So, which is great.
Oh,
are there any other questions from anybody else that's on the call at all?
Somebody must have a question. Don't be shy.
I mean, if not, we'll throw it back to Richard. He's always got questions, Rich has.
Yeah, I was going to ask something kind of on behalf of younger players, really. Kind of, a lot of the guys I teach at BIM are kind of 17, 18. So when it comes down to post the audition process, so say that a musician has been picked for the band, how would you advise they use their time between getting the gig and first rehearsal starting? Because knowing the stuff inside out is kind of a given. That's kind of unspoken. You should know it incredibly well and maybe even know other people's parts. But how else could they spend their time to make sure that when they get in the room, they're as ready as they can be and they can bring as much to that situation as possible?
Well, yeah, I would say in addition to knowing what they have to play, I would say maybe getting to know a bit about the artist as well that they're working for, maybe like having a good overview of their material, maybe actually research some of their shows, you know, if they've done shows before, try and figure out why they have a band, really. It sounds like a weird thing to say, but like, why are you there? What is it that you need to bring? What do they need? It's like, let's say you're coming into a band where they had a band before, like, what things did you see in that other band that were good, or what things did you see in that you think maybe I've got something else to bring that wasn't there before? Do you know what I mean? I think that's really important. And then also as well, maybe find out something about the people you're going to be playing with, you know, to get an idea about them, if that's any way possible. You know what I mean? I would also say make sure you're technically ready. You know, that's something that people sometimes, I would hope they are, but I would say, you know, have too much, you know what I mean? It's like always turn up with too much and too many ideas. Like you always kind of turn up with, you know, a bunch of gear, and then you kind of like whittle it down once you know what you're going to be using and what you're not. So you have to bear in mind, I think that, you know, you're providing a service, like I'm providing a service. So it's like, you want to try and be an asset. Do you know what I mean? That's what I think that young musicians should be thinking about. Like, sometimes people think, oh, you know, I've got this gig. Yeah, it's great. I'm going to be getting paid now and I'm going to be gigging. And it's like, it's not so much like about that. You have to think about what you can actually bring to it, or else you're not going to be doing it for that long. Do you know what I mean? So you have to think like, how can I be an asset to this MD? Do you know what I mean? Like, okay, if I can play keyboards, you know, like, hey, I know you didn't ask me, but I just bought a keyboard here anyway. You know, if you need any extra parts, I can do that. Do you know what I mean? Or like, you know, okay, I know you said it's cool to use a Kemper, but I bought my vintage amp as well, just in case you need it. You know what I mean? Or I know that, you know, it's just like, just providing options and just being an asset. So for me as an MD, that's like, if somebody comes in and they're like giving all these options, I'm like, oh, wow, great. You know, and I always think as well, like, you know, again, so much of this is like about what you can bring. You know, that's, everybody's looking for something. You know, the live experience, look, a record is a record. And it doesn't change. That's the whole thing. You record that piece of music, it's there for posterity. It's gonna be like that if you play it on Tuesday, if you play it on Friday, if you play it on the Sunday afterwards. You know what I mean? Whereas like a live performance, it's gonna be different every single time. That's the beauty of it. That's what makes it cherished. That's why it has value, because each one is unique. So it's like, you have to think to yourself, okay, I've learned all this stuff. I've learned what's on the record. Is there anything I can bring? do I have any ideas? Do I have any parts that I think would maybe be better than what's already there? And be prepared to shoot them out. If people shoot them down, cool, no problem. You know, just like, what about this? Oh, what about that? Just keep throwing things out there, because half the times those are the things which make the show really good. Sometimes a musician will do something and be like, yeah, that's it. That's the thing. And it's like, it won't be anything to do with me. It won't be anything. I don't know where they got the sound from or where they came up with it from. It's just something they might have just had, and that they kind of like, that they've just kind of brought to the table. I think there's a musician I work with, on Jess Glynn's band. Joe was always really good at this. I just remember the first year or so, whenever it was a break or whatever it was a bit of time off, he would just be still working on something. Like, what are you doing? He's just always being prepared. He was just, I was called, because he's a Liverpool fan, so I always made fun of him, like always prepared, because he was always working on something else, maybe a little thing to throw in here, maybe a little thing. And it's like, they don't always go in, they don't always work, but it's good to always have it. You know what I mean? Because I think that it just brings value to yourself as a musician, and how other people are going to see you. And that means that you're going to be seen as more useful for the next gig. Do you know what I mean? Because you're building relationships. That's the other thing. It's like, you can't think of it in the narrow context of one gig. You might be working with that MD for 10, 15 years. Do you know what I mean? You don't know. It's like I was saying, one of the people I did on my podcast the other day, he's played with the same bass player now for like close to 15 years over different gigs, but they've played together, like, you know, so it's like over and over again. So it's like you really cultivating those relationships and building those things and having things that you can kind of use is really important.
That's a really, really full answer. It's so much information. It's
sorry.
Okay, that's
I talk
great.
a lot, man. I'm sorry.
It's really, really great, because
if I talk too much, somebody just put up a shut up.
No,
I don't even know if they have that.
You know, as a young musician, you're kind of, you're trying to carve your way, and you through learning from people like yourself, kind of being honest and open with it. Sure. We've got another question in the chat. It comes from Chris Tompkinson. It says, hey Kojo, really enjoying the chat. As there's so much uncertainty in the live sector, are you now having a lot of conversations with labels, artists about live streaming performances online, and then those performances being ticketed or pay-per-view type of events? And if so, do you think it's a positive thing to be doing?
I would say it's starting. I would say there's definitely murmurs. I haven't had that many direct conversations myself about people saying, hey, yo, but then I have spoken to a couple of production managers and people like that I know that have done a few things like that. Because I heard BTS did a show like that the other day. A couple of other people that they mentioned, Mika. I think there's a few things happening like that where they are going to be ticketed online events. I think it's happening. And I think it's going to happen, if I'm honest with you. I think it's going to have to be the way forward. I think that it can be really good. I think that, like, if people can find a way to monetize what they do, then great. And particularly, I think that, like, you know, every challenge can be seen as an opportunity as well. So if you're sort of like a new artist, you know what I mean, and you're starting out, you know, perhaps that gives you an opportunity to have ownership of something quite early on. Do you know what I mean? If you're able to kind of like ticket your own shows or whatever, you know, that could be all your income. Do you know what I mean? So I think that it's a good, you know, I think that it's, again, there's nothing like live music and connecting to people in a live way, but I think that there can be some good from it, you know?
And it feels, I guess, if you're going on to online first as opposed to live, which might seem like a backwards way of doing it, I guess there's a ready-made, documented catalogue, so to speak, so that if you then are transferring from a digital performance into a live performance, there's an audience that might not necessarily have had that opportunity or been exposed to before, ready and waiting for you should you then announce a tour or go live.
Absolutely. When everything you do these days, it's just a flyer for the brand anyway. So it's sort of like, you know, artists do so many things nowadays. People kind of invest in kind of like consume artists and their music in so many different ways. It's not even just about the music, because it's like they see them on music, but then they see them on the internet, they see them on Twitter, they see them on Instagram, they see them on TV commercials. There's all these different things. So it's all just different pieces of a puzzle. You know, I saw an interesting thing the other day. It's completely unrelated, but it was Jay-Z. It was like how he made his 1 billion, or like his 1 billion fortune, was $1 billion fortune, what it consisted of, and only 75 million was from his record sales. And I found that fascinating to think that there's all these other things that he does as Jay-Z, the thing, you know what I mean? The entity that kind of contribute to his success. And I think that's the way it's going to be for artists. And that's the way it is for artists moving forward. You know, it's going to be a little bit of everything.
Well, I think we've got one more question in the chat, and I think this is probably a good one to kind of round out, you know, the kind of concept and the ethos of this whole Q&A session. It comes from Shikayla Marag, and it says, "Hi, Kojo. What does a typical audition look like for a musician wanting to play with a band for a successful artist? And also, what do you look for in a musician?"
Okay, so a typical audition would be where I structure them. Maybe you have like hour slots. You know, you might have 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4 throughout the day. And then you might see people, let's say it's a 4-piece band, you see people in a group. So, you know, drums, bass, keys, guitar. And you might be playing with people that you know, you might be playing with people that you don't know. And that's kind of can be challenging as well, because you might be a great bass player playing with not a great drummer, you know what I mean? Or maybe not a drummer that you click with. So that's how the setup would be. And you know, maybe you'll be given a couple of songs to learn ahead of that. And then you come in at your time slot, and then you're going to, you know, okay, let's do it. Somebody's going to start it off. I mean, it depends on whether, like, I might have some programming, I might have the backing track and have a click track ready and some elements together, and the band will be playing with it, or it might be a completely live audition, depending on the songs, like say with Liam Gallagher or something like that. It's just, it's just a rock band playing. So, but again, it'll be in slots, everybody playing together. And just trying to kind of feel your way through those couple of songs. Me as an MD in that scenario, I'm just trying to listen for a spark, you know, listen for something that's kind of unique about that person. You might talk to them a little bit. Hey, you know, if it's somebody that I don't know, I might have a brief conversation, find out where they're from, a bit about their background, whatever, try and go around the room, get to know a little bit about it, and then just kind of hear it. And then you just kind of like, you're seeing what kind of works. I think the one thing I would say with the audition process, though, it's really important for musicians to understand that every audition is everything is gig specific. So what I mean by that is, it's like, you might be a great musician, but you might not be the right type of musician for that particular band. So you know, you shouldn't really worry about that, because what I always say, when you're auditioning for that particular act, but you're kind of auditioning for the MD, you're auditioning for the label, you're auditioning for, you know, the other musicians. Because it's like, there's been many a time where I've seen people audition in auditions, and I haven't used them for maybe that particular gig or the gig after, but then maybe something else came along and I remember them from that audition, and I've kind of, you know, I've chosen them to do something. So I would say, try and leave an impression, and ideally a good one. Do you know what I mean? But, you know, I think with regards to auditioning, people sometimes say to me, "Oh, how should I play it? How should I play it?" And I always say, you know, you want to be true to the music to a degree, but then you have to bring something of it. So if you come and you play exactly what's on the record, or exactly what was on what I sent out for 4 minutes, I'm not going to really know if you have anything else. So maybe 2/3 of the song, you play it pretty straight ahead to show that you kind of have learned the music. And then maybe you throw some other things out at the end, and you put in some other ideas towards the end of the song, from the mid late onwards, or something like that. You know, what I'd say, things not to do is, don't come and not know the music. You know, that's really off-putting. I've had a few occasions where I've had to like tell people, like, please don't do that again, just simply because, if like, you have to look at it like, if you're playing with other people, you know, and you might have fucked up somebody else's audition. If you come as the bass player and you haven't learned the songs properly, and you thought to yourself, yeah, I'm just gonna jam this one out. What are we doing? Yeah, okay, cool, yeah. And you think it's like a jam night. You might fuck up the whole audition for everybody. So, you know, they should all make sure they learn the material. I know that seems like it would seem obvious, but there's been many times when people are, oh yeah, the thing is, I just got it and I didn't have a time and whatever, and how's it going? And it's just not really good. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that would be my kind of advice. Make sure, yeah.
That's a really great way to bring this to a close. So on behalf of everybody, I want to say thank you to you, Kojo, for giving me your time.
Thank you.
I want to reiterate my thanks to both BIM Birmingham and to Cube for their support in promoting this and enabling this opportunity that we can share with them. I also want to thank Heather Taylor from Redfire Music as well, who put me and you in touch, Kojo, as a result of some of the activities we've been already undertaking.
Yeah.
And basically, thank you for watching and participating, and stay safe and keep well, everyone.
Thank you
very much. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Cheers, Kojo. Thank you.